Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into personality.
Sounds good.
And we're using YouTube video as our, jumping off point.
Okay.
It's from English Podcast Zone. And the title is Building Vocabulary, Learn English Quickly with podcast episode 147.
All right, so we're tackling vocabulary and personality all in one go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be really helpful for our listeners who want to, be able to describe people better.
For sure.
And maybe even understand, their own personalities a bit more.
It's always fascinating to learn more about ourselves and those around us, right?
Absolutely.
So what did you find interesting about this video? Anything jump out at you?
Well, I liked how they started with this really relatable scenario.
Okay.
Imagine you're back in school and the teacher's handing back personality test results.
Yeah, I can picture it.
And some of the students start reading theirs out loud.
Right.
And we hear words like adventurous, outgoing, easygoing, superstitious, naive.
Interesting mix right off the bat.
Yeah, it got me thinking about how we form those first impressions of people.
Based on those initial traits, right? Like what stands out immediately.
Exactly. And then the video kind of breaks down these different adjectives. So it's not just about the words themselves.
More about understanding the nuances.
Right. So for example, they talked about outgoing, which they define as someone who feels comfortable, talking to people they don't know well.
Makes sense.
Like the example was, my brother is very outgoing. He loves meeting new people.
The quintessential social butterfly.
And, the opposite is obviously shy.
Two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. And I think this is important because it shows how differently people approach social situations.
Absolutely. Some thrive in those environments. Others find them draining.
Exactly. Then they moved on to superstitious.
Ooh, that's a fun one.
I know, right? And they highlighted how superstitions can vary so much from culture to culture.
That's so true.
Like in some Western cultures, walking under a ladder is considered bad luck.
Right, or opening an umbrella indoors.
Exactly. And it's interesting because it makes you think about how much our beliefs are influenced by where we grow up.
Our cultural background plays such a huge role in shaping our worldview, doesn't it?
Totally.
It's like these superstitions offer a way to explain things we don't fully understand, or even to control them in some way.
Yeah, like trying to avoid bad luck by following these little rituals.
Fascinating how that works.
Okay, next up was naive.
That one can be a bit tricky.
I know. They defined it as someone who generally believes what they're told.
Okay.
And they actually used a kind of funny example, like imagine someone believing it's raining frogs.
That's a good one.
But the video also pointed out that calling someone naive can sometimes be offensive.
Right, because it implies they're easily fooled or lack experience.
Exactly, so it's definitely a word to use carefully.
Context is everything.
Okay, so now we're getting into some of the more negative adjectives.
All right, let's hear it.
So there's reckless, which is basically acting without thinking.
Potentially dangerous behavior.
Yeah, and they gave the example of driving without a seatbelt.
Classic example of not thinking about the consequences.
Right, and it makes you realize how differently people approach risk.
Some people are daredevils, others are more cautious.
Totally. And then we have clumsy.
Oh, I relate to that one a little too much sometimes.
Me too. It's like always tripping, dropping things.
The classic butterfingers.
Yeah. And the video actually showed a funny old commercial with these clumsy high school students.
I love when they bring in pop culture references like that.
It makes it more memorable, right?
Totally. And what's funny about clumsy is that it's not really a serious insult.
True. More of a lighthearted teasing kind of thing.
Okay, so those were some of the more, shall we say, colorful adjectives.
Yes. But the video didn't stop there. They also covered a bunch of positive ones, which I appreciated.
Of course, everyone loves a good dose of positivity.
Right. So first up was extroverted.
Another word for outgoing. Right?
Exactly. They describe it as enjoying meeting new people, being social.
The life of the party.
And the opposite, of course, is introverted.
Someone who prefers quieter settings, smaller groups.
Yeah, it all comes back to that spectrum of social energy we were talking about earlier.
It's so important to recognize and respect those differences in how people recharge.
Couldn't agree more.
What other positive traits did they highlight?
Well, there was diligent.
Ooh, that's a good one for the workplace.
I know, right? It means being careful, thorough, and punctual.
The dream employee.
Yeah, they even gave the example, Marco, you are very diligent at work.
Shows dedication and reliability.
Exactly. Then we have magnanimous.
Now, that's a word you don't hear every day.
I know. It basically means being unselfish, doing things for the benefit of others.
A truly admirable quality.
Yeah, the example was someone donating a big chunk of their salary to earthquake victims.
Wow, that's incredibly generous.
Right. And someone even says, Marco, that's so magnanimous of you.
It speaks to a deep sense of compassion and generosity.
Okay, another great positive word was eloquent.
Oh, the gift of gab.
Kind of. It describes someone who's a really skilled speaker.
Someone who can captivate an audience.
Exactly. They use language effectively, maybe even use big words, but in a way that makes sense.
It's not just about vocabulary, it's about delivery and impact.
Right. And in today's world, being able to communicate well is so important.
Absolutely. It can make or break so many things.
And finally, for the positive adjectives, we have daring.
Ooh, that one can be a bit of a double-edged sword.
I know. It means being willing to take risks, which can be a good thing.
Like a daring entrepreneur who starts a successful business.
Right. But it can also be negative if those risks are, like, reckless.
Taking unnecessary chances without considering the consequences.
They even gave a personal example from the video of Marco going skydiving.
I guess that could be seen as daring or reckless, depending on your perspective.
Exactly. So it really depends on the context.
Okay, so we've covered a whole bunch of adjectives, both positive and negative.
Right. But the video also talked about how we can actually use these words.
In real-life situations.
Yeah. Like, imagine you're in a job interview.
And they ask you to describe yourself?
Exactly. They suggested thinking of 3 adjectives.
Okay, so what would your 3 be?
That's a tough one. Maybe creative, curious, and I guess a bit of a perfectionist.
I can see that. How about you?
I think I'd go with analytical, resourceful, and maybe a tad too sarcastic at times.
Haha, fair enough.
But it's a good exercise, right? It forces you to really think about your key traits.
And how you want to present yourself to the world.
Exactly. And then they have this funny little bit about describing someone you don't like.
Oh, tell me more.
So they introduced the concept of a type A personality.
The classic go-getter, always on the move.
Right, but they said it can be too much sometimes.
Too extroverted, too driven, maybe a bit controlling.
Exactly. And not always the best listeners.
I think we all know a few type A personalities.
Probably. But it's interesting how those traits, which could be positive on their own,
Can become negative when they're taken to an extreme.
or when they're all combined together.
It highlights the importance of balance, right?
For sure.
Okay, so after all these examples, the video finally gave us some formal definitions.
Which is helpful to kind of ground everything.
Right, like a framework for understanding.
So they said personality is essentially the way a person thinks, feels, and behaves.
Makes sense.
And that's what makes each of us unique.
Our own special blend of traits and tendencies.
Exactly. And then they defined a character trait as a specific quality that makes someone who they are.
The building blocks of personality.
Yeah. And then, get this, they provided this whole list of positive and negative traits.
Okay, let's hear the good ones first.
So for positive traits, they had friendly, kind, honest, hardworking,
All the classic.
confident, patient, creative, generous, and polite.
It's like a checklist of admirable qualities.
I know, right? And they gave examples for each one.
Oh, I like that. What were some of them?
Like, for friendly, they said Emma talks to everyone.
Makes sense.
For kind, they said someone helps classmates with homework.
Oh, that's sweet.
And for honest, they said someone admits when they make a mistake.
Takes a lot of courage to do that.
It does.
Yeah.
And then for the negative traits,
Okay, let's see the flip side.
they had rude, lazy, impatient, arrogant, selfish,
Oh boy, not a great bunch.
shy, moody, bossy, and stubborn.
A recipe for conflict.
Yeah. And again, they gave little examples for each one.
Like what?
Well, for rude, they said someone didn't say thank you to a waiter.
Ouch. Yeah, that's pretty basic courtesy.
And for lazy, they said someone never does their homework.
The classic procrastinator.
I know. And for impatient, they said someone hates waiting in line.
Who doesn't? Haha, just kidding.
It's all about perspective, right?
Totally. So all these traits, both positive and negative, come together to create our personalities.
And the video actually went a step further.
Oh,
They talked about different types of personalities.
interesting.
Like the outgoing person, the quiet person, the funny person, the serious person, and the kind and caring person.
So they put those traits together into these broad categories.
Yeah. And they gave descriptions and examples for each one.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so for the outgoing person, they said they're friendly, talkative, confident, energetic.
Okay, I can picture that.
And the example was Sarah, who makes friends easily.
that tracks.
And then for the quiet person, they're shy, calm, thoughtful, patient.
The introvert.
Right. And the example was David, who likes to read alone.
Sounds about right.
And then for the funny person, they're cheerful, silly, energetic, creative.
The class clown.
Yeah. And the example was Mike, who tells jokes.
Makes sense.
For the serious person, they're responsible, hardworking, honest, organized.
Reliable one.
And the example was Anna, who studies hard.
I bet she gets good grades.
Probably. And lastly, for the kind and caring person, they're helpful, loving, generous, polite.
The heart of gold.
And the example was Emma, who always helps her friends.
Oh, that's heartwarming. I know, right? It's cool to see those different personality types laid out like that.
It makes you think about where you might fit in, or maybe people you know. Totally. And then they even showed how to use these descriptions in sentences.
Practical application.
Like he is very friendly and always smiles at people.
Simple but effective.
Right. And finally, the video wrapped up by talking about why understanding personality is so important.
A good way to bring it all together.
Yeah. They said it helps us make friends, communicate better, work well with others, and avoid misunderstandings.
All incredibly valuable skills.
Couldn't agree more.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. What are your final takeaways from this deep dive?
I think the biggest thing for me is that learning about personality is not just about labeling people.
Right. It's about understanding the complexities of human behavior.
Exactly. And it can help us navigate our relationships and interactions in a more thoughtful way.
For sure.
I also love that they gave us so many practical tools, like those lists of traits and examples of how to use them in sentences.
It's all about making this knowledge accessible and applicable.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that everyone is the unique mix of traits.
There's no one-size-fits-all.
Right. And understanding those differences can make us more empathetic and compassionate.
Couldn't agree more. So for our listeners out there, what personality trait do you value most in others and why? That's something to ponder.
Definitely food for thought.
Until next time.